unusual.
They said, oh yeah, it's our letterhead, it's our seal, it's a blah, blah, blah. You can't just download it from the internet
No.
in the 1950s.
No, you can't.
So he had this stuff in his possession, but they said, oh, it's account number blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, that doesn't exist. And they said, well, it's under this name, which, by the way, there's no name actually associated with this story.
With that guy.
But they said, oh, it's in this name. And they said, well, that guy doesn't have an account here, so I don't know what you're dealing with. They also then contacted his place of work, which was a real business. And again, they could not explain how the man had so much documentation that he worked for him, but they didn't have record of him existing or being an employee.
This is really weird.
It's really weird, right? He has all this documentation that should prove that he exists. He seems to be very sincere and cooperative and actually genuinely confused about why the place that he is from doesn't exist. But everything else seems to be normal to him. He's dressed in normal clothes. He speaks fluent Japanese. He has actual currency from actual places.
Did he have any from Tared?
I don't know. Maybe. I presume he did because he was from there, but he had a driver's license from there, but there you have it. Anyways, this interrogation and fact-checking and all of that stuff, it took about 8 hours, at which point all parties were basically just tired. He wasn't being uncooperative. They weren't getting anywhere. But they weren't getting anywhere because it was all dead ends. So the police decided to just place the man in a guarded hotel room at night. They didn't want to lock him up in jail. He hadn't really actually technically broken any laws.
You gotta love Japanese hospitality.
I know.
Technically, he didn't break any laws. He was being cooperative. He was being sincere. He was genuinely confused and frustrated and scared. So they thought, well, we'll just put him in the hotel. We'll just, have a guard posted outside and we'll be fine. Of course, they picked a room. There was a small window, a ledge, no ledge, things like that. Minor security measures that you would. But basically, I think they seemed to feel bad for the guy. They allowed him to have dinner at the hotel restaurant and then escorted him back to his hotel room. And all parties agreed, including this man, that they would just continue to try and get to the bottom of it in the morning because everybody kind of wanted to know what was going on. When they went to go get him in the morning, he wasn't there. He was gone.
He just left?
Yeah, well, I don't know
He checked out.
He didn't check out.
He had a
there
guard,
was a
right?
guard posted outside the only door that could get him out of the place. And he said the door didn't open all night. He didn't hear anything unusual. There was no suspicious behavior. There was just a small window leading out of the room, and there was no ledge or anything, and it was on a busy street.
It's like the second or third story or something like that?
It was higher than that. It was my impression it was the fifth or sixth.
Were there any great blinding flashes of light?
Not as far. The guard said nothing unusual to report, just went to knock on the door, and then suddenly there was nobody there. Mm-hmm. So the Japanese officials, of course, mounted a search. But then about after a day decided, we're not going to find him. So they just stopped looking for him. And
I guess it is.
I think they probably just decided it was all too weird and they would just leave it be.
It's Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
There's a gazillion people in Tokyo, even in 1954.
Absolutely.
I can imagine trying to find him, even a white guy. When there's enough people around, it's going to be hard to track down.
Absolutely. So they're actually... Sorry, go ahead.
So this guy was a time traveler from the future, correct?
I don't think it's from the future. He was modern to that time, right? It didn't seem as though he had been blasted from the future back in. His clothes were very authentic to the time, things like that. So actually there are a couple theories about this. One is that he just came from an alternate reality of worlds that exist in this universe or in multiple universes.
That is
the multiverse theory.
The multiverse theory is a thing, yep.
So I guess it's possible that this man came from an alternate dimension Earth even, in which the only difference was a tiny sovereign country.
Or the only difference that they found out about.
Right.
Which this falls into that same fourth dimension holes lining up, somebody accidentally popping through thing Joe was talking through.
Yeah. It's totally possible that he just popped into our universe, not from a different time, but from a different universe. Mm-hmm. That was the only really difference that we could discern. I think that he probably would have said other things if he realized. He would have maybe said, oh, well, yeah, and then there's this war happening, and there's like, what? Or
Yeah.
oh, well, why are you guys all not wearing green right now? You know, things like little things.
Yeah.
But if there are in the multiverse theory, that is literally a possibility. Literally, you know, there could be a universe where the only possibility is that Steve has hair. That's the only difference in the universe.
I have hair.
Well,
it's clear.
Yeah.
I have a full head of hair. It's just clear.
You're right. I'm sorry. Anyways, there's another theory.
But actually, this actually suggests a way to solve the mystery. If these clods had only thought of it back then, which is that Andorra. If the only difference is that Andorra in our world was named Torred in the other world, then there's got to be a copy of this guy living in Andorra.
Yeah.
And there's only 85,000 people, so it would have been a simple matter to interrogate everybody.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, that'd be totally easy, Joe. You're right.
Yeah.
You're totally right.
Oh, of course.
No. There's another theory here, less metaphysical. It is possible that this man was brainwashed, right? He was genuinely confused. It's possible that he had been brainwashed and led to believe that he was from a country that didn't exist. Maybe for a recon mission. It's also possible...
A recon mission into Japan?
Well, to see if he could get in, right? I mean, he gets in on a fake passport, or how long does it take them to actually react, or whatever.
Or notice it?
Yeah, if you're trying to invade a country, or if you're trying to, like, sneak in for whatever reason, will people notice something, and how far can you push the forgery, for instance, if it was a forgery? How far can you push... bad documents, how far can you push that before officials will actually notice?
So they're testing their Japanese security.
Yeah, absolutely. It could also have been a dark government ploy gone awry.
Yeah, I was just thinking it could have been like some spy con kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, well, once you have a story, you stick to it.
Yeah.
Until you can escape, you stick to your story.
But if you're actually going to be a kind of a spy trying to slip into the country, you know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to have a passport from a phony country.
Yeah, why wouldn't you just do the same country? The thing that I actually think is valid in this, though, is that the passport was stamped a number of times, and typically, if you're just bringing the passport up to somebody for your visa stamp, they see it stamped before, they're just going to assume it's a good passport. They don't need to check it, stamp it, and send you on your way. Particularly if you're deplaning with hundreds of people, right? It's easier to just get lost in that crowd and have them just keep stamping. Unfortunately, similar to Joe's story, it's just a story. The original source for the story was a book called The Directory of Possibilities, and I've actually read the portion of this book that pertains to this, and it's definitely, literally just a story. Really? Sorry, guys.
So it explicitly states in this book this is all just fiction?
No, but it doesn't try and claim, oh, and here's a source for it, and here's another source for it. It's just a directory of possibilities where they tell a bunch of sci-fi stories and they say, well, this might have happened. I don't know, maybe. So, sorry.
It's just a short story fiction book.
Yeah.
Got it.
Like my story, it turned into an urban legend.
Yeah, actually that book contains within it a lot of kind of popped out into History Dimensions stories. Rudolph Fentz may even be in there.
The next one that we've got would be my story.
Yeah.
Which is the
chronologically next.
Chronologically next.
And this one's going to be true.
Is John Titor or Teeter? I've heard the name.
I always say Titer.
I've heard it pronounced a couple of different ways. I'm just gonna go with Teeter.
That's fine, Teeter.
The story of John Titor is the name of a self-proclaimed time traveler from the year 2036.
Yeah.
He first appeared on internet forums for the Time Travel Institute on the 2nd of November 2000. But he wasn't calling himself John Titor. He was instead calling himself, or using his handle, Time Traveler _0.
Well, he must have gotten on there pretty quick, because seems like that would have been taken pretty
on the
easily.
Time Travel Institute forum, you would think that's probably why he had the 0. Probably. Because
Even
somebody
that.
else got Time Traveler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Time travel.
Or time travel. Yeah. That's probably one of the moderators. Teeter would go on to make claims or predictions about future events and provide descriptions of how time travel worked. And then he would, quote unquote, leave Us on the 24th of March 2001.
I mean, he went back to the future?
Apparently.
Huh, so he came, spent about 5 months in the 21st century, and then left, huh?
Yeah. The original posts, as the name of the forum, Time Travel Institute, or the forum would indicate, were about time travel. And it wasn't until he started using the forums in 2001.
January, right?
Yeah, January of 2001 for the now defunct Art Bell forums that the name John Teeter came about.
Okay.
And that's because they required a name instead of just a handle, right?
That is absolutely correct. They required a actual name instead of just some made up whatever you wanted to use. Now, I just briefly mentioned there is the Art Bell forums aren't in existence anymore, but people liked or were so interested in what Teeter said that they actually copied the again. But here's what he claimed. He said that he was a soldier sent from the year 2036, and a computer virus and or bug. I never was quite clear on
Bug.
this.
It's
Is
a
it
bug.
okay? Because
Yeah.
I've seen it called the virus. I've seen it called the bug.
It's a bug.
Okay. Was gonna wipe out the computers in his world, and his mission was to head back to 1975 in order to get an IBM 5100 computer, which was had evidently the necessary equipment to fight that bug.
Yeah, it was to fix it.
Yes.
I think you're going to talk about this a little bit, but it is an actual thing.
It really
that
is.
was actually happening at that time that very few people knew about.
Yes,
What?
that is correct. Well, yeah.
The IBM 5100, you mean?
Yeah,
No, the bug.
Well, yeah.
that
Here's
existed.
what it is the IBM 5100. People say, or we've figured out, it has the ability to read both APL, which I believe stands for a programming language,
Actually,
and basic code. No one knew until after Teeter's posts had stopped that what he was saying was accurate, and indeed, engineers from IBM confirmed that yes, this computer from 1975 was able to use both of these codes, both APL and BASIC.
I think just about any computer can use those things.
I
mean, the thing about it is like...
I have very limited programming knowledge. I will admit that right now.
Yeah, essentially, the way it works is any computer, the only language it speaks is machine code, like hexadecimal code. And then if you want to run a language like C++, then you've got to either get an interpreter or a compiler. So you write your program in C++ or in BASIC or in APL, and then you compile it. The compiler translates that into machine code that the computer actually knows. Does that make sense?
Some, but I'm guessing that not every computer can read every other computer's compiled code. That's why I can't put something from Windows on an Apple computer.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get a compiler that's specific to that particular type of machine, sure.
And I think that's basically what the IBM 5100 was all about. But here's the reason that they're after it, is that there is an issue with Unix or Unix-based code.
Which is everything.
Which is...
just to clarify.
Most everything,
Every operating system we use at this point is Unix.
Is it now? Okay. Again, I'm programming, not my wheelhouse. The thing is everybody will remember the whole kerbuffle of Y2K and how it was going to screw up the banking system because of the way the numbers go. Well, there's the same issue with Unix. It's called the year 2038 problem. This again, I had to simplify this just to wrap my head around it. What it means is that there's going to be an issue at 3 hours, 14 seconds, or 14 minutes, 7 seconds. Universal Time Code, is that what UTC stands for? Okay. On the 19th of January, 2038, at which point, because of the way that Unix encodes the date, time in binary format, it's not going to be able to record it properly anymore, and its clocks are going to jump back to 1901.
It runs out of space.
Is it runs out of space or it starts over to what those old ones
so
were?
it only has a specific number of slots, right?
Correct.
Right, so it can't be an infinite, we'll just have all of this binary code go on forever. So I from what I understand from the research that I did about this, is that what happens at that very second is that you hit the limit, so it's going to restart. Yeah.
At
Back to
1901. Yeah.
Or whatever the computer thinks. But really the main problem is it runs out of things.
It can't go to the next second.
Yeah, it can't go to 11.
8 seconds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. But again, I'm not a...
I'm not. Yeah, I've used Unix actually in my jobs in the past. I don't recall ever hearing about this particular issue.
Well, that's because it's been solved at this point. It's not. It's a non-issue. But at this time in programming history, it was an issue that IBM actually knew about, and that they were not advertising for reasons that are probably fairly clear. And actually, that as he was saying, IBM knew about it, and they confirmed it after this story because a bunch of people were saying, "Well, IBM, is this true? Can you validate this?" And they said, "Well, we weren't really going to tell anybody, but yes." And apparently it was one of those things that very few people knew about outside of IBM. Apparently.
Yeah,
That's what I've read.
And in Teeter's time as well as ours, like Devil was talking about, everything was Unix-based, so it was going to cause this huge problem because they hadn't figured out how to fix it in his time.
So they had to reset it with this new computer, right?
I'm going to be honest. I still don't understand what the IBM 5100 was going to do.
Somebody tell us.
That doesn't make a lot of sense, yeah.
Well,
it actually, I don't know. When you go out and read it, it may...
Yeah, you can read it, and if code makes sense to you, you'll get it. It doesn't to me as many times as I read it in many versions. It's just that I just don't think that way.
Yeah.
But back to Teeter, he said that his reason for being in the year 2000 was for personal reasons. Over the period of about 4 months, he responded to questions from people who were posting on the forums. He described future events, but he always, and I gotta admit, this is a pretty good thing that he did for himself.
Foolproof, yeah.
Yeah, is he always kind of gave the general disclaimer that there are multiple realities and alternate realities do exist, and so it's possible that we might not be in the same timeline as where he came from.
Well, didn't he describe the way that you have to time travel without paradoxes?
Yeah,
in that way? Are you? Okay.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to that.
And obviously he's not on the same timeline as us because IBM fixed the year 2038 problem.
That's the first thing that comes up there, yeah. But he talks about some things. He gives some dire warnings for everybody to learn first aid and stop eating beef because, well, Mad Cow his time.
In fairness, it was a little bit of a thing for us,
It
too.
was a little bit of a thing for us, but it evidently in his time is knocking people out left, right, and center.
Although, again, in fairness, I'm not totally sure how first aid helps with mad cow disease, but okay.
Maybe he's talking about an apocalypse or something like that?
Yeah, that's where that's coming from, and we're going to get into that just in a moment. I just want to get a couple of other things that he gave information on.
Sure.
He provided a bunch of technical specs regarding how time travel worked, which I read through a little bit of it. It's pretty interesting. He used some really complex algorithms. He gave some hard to understand images of his time machine, and his time machine was pretty awesome because it was
I love it.
Well, the first one was in what was it? It was a car. It was
a Chevy Suburban.
Well, no, it eventually
he moved
ended up.
yeah,
he moved it to a Suburban, but it was in some kind of 70s sports car. I want to say it was like a Camaro or a Corvette.
I love this thing, man. I love also that, you need a car for it, but you can just move it from car to car. That's awesome,
Well, it's just, it's like the DeLorean. Back to the Future.
Except for that the DeLorean was integral to that time machine, right? It was embedded in the DeLorean, whereas this thing was a huge box, right?
Do you have to have a car so you can plug this thing into the cigarette lighter? And
I think it's like to make it move with you.
That's how it ran. It's on that cigarette plug connection.
So did he go to a museum and get himself a classic 70s car, or why didn't he just Why didn't he grab a futuristic car and bring that back? That would have been much more cool.
I think he wanted to blend in, right? If you're a time traveler, you want to blend in a little.
Yeah, you don't want to have a 2027 car.
But also maybe
in
cars didn't
75.
exist, really. In a way
Maybe.
that he could find one, right?
I don't know. I mean, that's the hard thing is he showed a lot of things that were plausible, but there wasn't a whole lot there to really back up. The other thing that he showed, of course, was his awesomely cool futuristic military insignia.
I think it's